I remember the first time I found myself alone in that forest. The fog clung to my skin like a damp blanket, and every breath felt heavy, almost tangible, as though it were made of smoke. Pale light flickered in the distance, barely illuminating the skeletal branches, and the silence was so absolute that my own heartbeat sounded like a hammer in my chest. Somewhere, a door creaked, or was it a tree bending? I tried to steady myself, telling myself it was nothing, but then a faint humming began, low, constant, and impossibly close. It didn't belong to any machine or animal I knew. I whispered my own name, hoping for an echo, but there was only the fog, swallowing my words whole. That's when I saw it, a shadow that didn't belong, moving with a deliberateness that made my skin crawl. And somehow, it was waiting for me. The night was heavy. Rain tapped lightly against the windshield, uneven, like a hesitant heartbeat. The motel sign swung in the wind, chains rattling, glowing pale and unsteady. It felt like a warning, or a promise. I couldn't tell which. I stepped inside. The lights flickered, throwing half-shadows across walls that seemed to lean closer with each blink. The air smelled faintly of mildew, dust, and something coppery, like old coins left too long in a drawer. A chill threaded through my jacket, settling on my skin like a soft hand. Then I saw it. A door where none had been before. Pale wood, grain twisting unnaturally, almost alive. The floorboards creaked under my weight, whispers sliding through the cracks. I felt them brushing my ankles, skimming along my spine. I reached for the doorknob. Cold, damp, unyielding. A tremor ran up my arm. The hairs on my neck rose. Blinking, the room shifted. Corners stretched. Shadows flickered like candlelight in a storm. The room seemed to exhale. I knew it was waiting. I stepped back. The door closer now. Every instinct told me to run. Every sense told me to stay. The wind outside rattled the sign again. A soft, impossible whisper slid along the floorboards. And then silence. I didn't move. I couldn't. The motel was alive, and I was its guest. The carpet muffled my steps, but it could not hide the rhythm behind me. Soft, deliberate, echoing mine almost perfectly. I turned. Nothing. The hallway stretched. Corners bent unnaturally, elongating as if the walls themselves were breathing. Doors leaned farther away, tilting slightly in the dim light. Whispers crawled along the wallpaper, brushing my ears, tugging at forgotten memories. The air smelled of damp paint, dust, and fabric left too long in the sun. I walked faster. The footsteps matched. Closer. Shadows pooled under flickering lights. They stretched when I tried to focus, drifting along the walls, twisting like smoke. I pressed my back to the wall, shoulders tight. Every step I took was mirrored, though no one was there. A soft exhale followed me down the hall. Impossible, yet undeniable. My pulse quickened. Time slowed. I dared to peek into one of the rooms. Dark, still, empty, yet the silence pressed against me, thick and suffocating. The footsteps stopped. A single, barely audible creak came from the far end of the hallway. I swallowed. Every instinct screamed to run, but the hall seemed endless. It didn't want me to leave. It wanted me to notice. A whisper drifted along the walls. Not words, just sound, low, curling around my ears. Something alive, waiting unseen. I took another step. The hallway stretched farther. The lights flickered again. Shadows gathered in corners I had passed. Pressing close, watching, breathing. I stopped and listened, alone, but not alone. The lobby was dim. A single bulb trembled in its socket, flickering weak light across the floor. Shadows stretched and recoiled, crawling along the walls like slow, deliberate fingers. A mirror caught my eye. It shimmered, hesitation rippling across its surface. I lifted a hand. The reflection did not. It smiled when I did not. Slow, deliberate, almost patient. The air thickened metallic, humming faintly in my ears. I could feel it in my fingertips, crawling along my skin like static electricity. I stepped closer. The reflection raised a hand I had never lifted. I blinked. It continued. Calm, watching, waiting. The floor beneath me seemed to pulse. The walls hummed with soft, impossible vibrations. I wanted to move, but something held me there. I left the lobby quickly. My shoes whispered against the carpet. I glanced back once. The mirror waited. It did not blink. It did not breathe. Yet I could feel its gaze lingering, soft and heavy against my back. The hallway beyond felt colder. The air smelled faintly of wax, dust, and something metallic. Each shadow stretched a little farther than it should. Every corner seemed alive, as if the motel itself had taken note of me. I kept moving. Silent steps, heart hammering, listening to the soft, almost imperceptible hum of the building around me. Even when I closed the lobby door behind me, I could still feel the reflection, watching, waiting, patient, and I knew I was not yet ready to leave. A key appeared on the counter. No note, no explanation, just a small, cold object resting on polished wood, as if it had always been meant for me. I found the door unlocked. No number, no place on the floor plan. The walls outside it seemed to lean inward slightly, dark paint peeling like curling skin. I turned the key. The lock clicked with a hollow resonance. Dust drifted from the frame, motes shimmering in the pale light of the hallway. Inside, everything was still, preserved, like a memory trapped in amber. A rocking chair creaked gently in the corner, slow, deliberate, as if someone or something was moving it when I wasn't looking. Then I saw the figure, pale, seated, almost floating in the dim light. It didn't move, didn't breathe, yet I felt its awareness pressing into me. My chest tightened, breath shallow. I wanted to speak, but the words refused to form. The door slammed behind me. The sound echoed, bouncing off walls that seemed to inhale with the impact. I could feel the room pulsing beneath my feet. Every object shifted subtly when I glanced away, returning to its previous position only when I dared look again. I tried to leave. The door didn't budge. The key was still in the lock, heavy in my hand, but the air thickened, pressing in. A faint hum began, vibrating through the walls, through the floor, through my chest. I stood frozen. The rocking chair continued its slow motion. The pale figure did not move its head. Yet I felt it watching every beat of my heart, counting my hesitation. Time seemed to stretch. A long, suspended second. Then another. The room had always existed, waiting, and I had stepped directly into it. I didn't know if I would leave. I only knew the motel had not yet finished noticing me. Alone in room 6, the silence pressed close. The kind of silence that seems heavier than air, that seeps into your bones. Then the television flickered. A pale glow trembled across the walls. White noise filled the room, crackling like distant thunder, vibrating in my chest. I hadn't turned it on. It was alive. Faces began to emerge in the static. Faint, flickering, twisted shapes, dissolving before I could focus. They whisper my name. Soft, breathy, almost teasing, brushing along my ears like cold wind through a keyhole. I reached for the remote. It slipped from my fingers, clattering against the floor. The sound echoed oddly in the small room, and the static pulsed with my heartbeat, sinking to me in a slow, deliberate rhythm. I squinted. One face lingered longer than the others. Eyes hollow, deep, impossible. It seemed to know me. I felt a weight in the room, pressing against my chest, as if the air itself was alive. A metallic tang filled my nose. The carpet felt soft beneath my fingers when I knelt, yet something in the shadows seemed to shift beneath me. The television's hum thickened. Figures pressed closer, yet blurred when I tried to focus. It was impossible to look directly at them and survive the sense of being watched. I stood slowly, hands trembling. The walls seemed to pulse. The floor beneath me whispered in tiny creaks. Even the air tasted heavy, dense, like the motel had drawn it close around me. The static flared. Faces multiplied. Some pleading, some mocking, all fading into white noise before I could make sense of them. I sat back down, exhausted and trembling, too afraid to move, too aware to close my eyes. The television hummed. The faces whispered. The room breathed along with me, alive, aware, and I understood I was no longer alone. Night fell like a heavy curtain. The fog outside pressed against the window, thick and suffocating. Inside, the walls seemed to breathe. Soft at first, a gentle rustling. Then louder, more deliberate, moving closer with each heartbeat. I pressed my ear to the plaster. Voices whispered. Names I didn't recognize, yet somehow felt familiar. Shadows pulled beneath the bed, stretching toward the ceiling. The room pulsed with slow, unrelenting life. Every creak of the floor sounded magnified. The air smelled faintly of mildew, old wood, and something sharp and metallic like rusted nails. I wanted to move, but my body felt rooted, pressed to the carpet as if the room itself was holding me. A soft exhale came from behind the walls. Almost human, almost sorrowful. I swallowed hard. The hairs on my arms stood straight. The fog outside mirrored the tension inside. Thick, rolling, moving like it had a mind of its own. Shadows flickered within it, pale shapes drifting silently. I pressed my back against the wall, trying to feel solid ground. The rustling grew closer, curling around the edges of the room. I could hear whispers now, just beneath comprehension, soft words fragmented, dissolving before I could understand them. The rocking chair in the corner shifted, but no one sat in it. Shadows clung to its edges, stretching like smoke. I held my breath. The room hummed with subtle vibration. Time seemed suspended, each second heavy, thick. Outside, the wind pressed against the window again. Inside, the walls whispered, rustled, breathed. I felt watched, and I knew that I could not leave. Not yet. Through the frosted window, I saw it, a figure, pale, still, watching. I blinked. When I opened my eyes, it had moved closer. I swallowed hard. My voice caught. I tried to speak. Nothing came out. The cold pressed against my lips, swallowing my words before they could leave. The fog outside shifted, thick and slow. It wrapped around the figure, softening its edges, stretching it, elongating its presence. I could feel its gaze through the glass, heavy and patient, weighting my chest, pinning me to the carpet. I called again. Still nothing. Only the faintest whisper drifted through the air. I couldn't understand it, but I could feel the sadness in its tone. Soft, deep, pulling at something inside me I hadn't known existed. Its eyes were hollow, but not empty. They carried memory, loneliness, something lost, long forgotten. The fog pressed closer. I shivered, pulling my jacket tighter. My fingers traced the glass. Cold, wet, alive. I stepped back. The figure mirrored me across the frost, but its movements were slower, deliberate, patient, waiting. I realized then that it had always been there, watching, not threatening, not friendly, just waiting. The silence stretched between us. Outside, the wind whispered, carrying something that sounded like my name. Inside, my heartbeat echoed. Alone, but not alone. And as I turned away from the window, I could still feel it. Standing there, patient, sad, watching. Behind a closet, I discovered stairs. Narrow, dusty, hidden. They led upward, into darkness sealed for decades. I forced the door open. The hinges groaned, metal scraping against old wood, echoing through the silence. A musty smell hit me, mothballs, dust, old leather, and something faintly metallic. Light from the hallway barely reached inside. The air felt heavy, almost viscous, as if the attic itself were holding its breath. Inside were rows of old suitcases, cracked and worn, stacked in quiet disorder. Faded photographs lay scattered on the floor. Every image depicted guests who had stayed in this motel. But their eyes, hollow, staring, watching. Some faces seemed familiar, though I couldn't place why. I knelt to examine one photo. It shook violently, as if alive, trembling under my fingertips. A shiver ran through me. The attic seemed to hum softly, a low vibration through the floorboards. I could feel it through my shoes, through my bones. The air pressed close to my skin. Every shadow stretched a little longer than it should, curling toward me, lingering in corners. A suitcase shifted slightly on its own. I froze, heart hammering. The attic exhaled. Or maybe it was just a wind. Soft, deliberate, impossible to tell. I took a step back. The photographs seemed to follow me with their eyes. Breathing in the dim light, pulsing faintly. I realized I could not look away. A soft whisper curled around my ears. Fragmented words, names I did not know, and yet somehow familiar. I felt the attic remembering me, too, learning me, weighing me. I wanted to leave, but the stairs seemed farther than before. The door appeared smaller, the hallway beyond longer. Something waited at the edge of my vision, pale and patient. I swallowed. The attic held its secrets close, and I was intruding. Outside, the wind carried a tune. Soft, eerie, almost human. It threaded through the fog like a finger tracing my spine, tugging me toward the edge of the motel. I followed it, hesitant. Footsteps pressed into the damp ground. But when I glanced down, they weren't mine. Each print vanished when I looked again, leaving only the cold fog swirling around my ankles. The trees swayed in unnatural rhythm, bending and twisting as if listening. Shadows flickered in the fog, pale shapes moving just beyond the reach of sight. I blinked and they shifted closer, then farther, always just beyond my focus. A faint whisper rode the wind, soft syllables curling around my ears. Not quite a word, not quite a sound. I felt the weight of it pressing into my chest. The air smelled damp, earthy, metallic. Each breath tasted cold and sharp, carrying the chill of the night deep into my lungs. I reached the edge of the parking lot. The motel lights flickered on and off, casting brief, trembling illumination across the fog. In one flash, I saw a figure between the trees, pale, watching, then gone. The wind changed, softening, guiding me along the perimeter of the building. Every shadow I passed seemed to lean closer, curious, patient. The fog and the motel merged, breathing together. I was being led, but I didn't know where or why. A low hum vibrated through ground, almost imperceptible at first, then growing, pulsing with the rhythm of my heartbeat. The shapes in the fog shifted, flowing like smoke, always beckoning, always retreating. I paused, breath caught in my throat. The wind's tune whispered in my ears, insistent, almost pleading. I realized then the fog was alive. The motel had extended beyond its walls, and I was inside its embrace. Lying in bed, the room was silent, almost too silent. Every shadow pressed close against the walls, lingering, waiting. Then the whispers began, soft at first, indistinct, like air moving through tiny cracks in the ceiling. They grew clearer, forming words that felt familiar, though I could not place them. Stories of forgotten events, memories unclaimed, names I had never heard, yet somehow I knew. The ceiling pulsed softly, matching my heartbeat, a slow, deliberate rhythm that I could feel through my chest, through the soles of my feet. The walls leaned inward, attentive, alive. I wanted to move, to scream, but the air swallowed every sound. Even my thoughts felt muted, dissolving into the ceiling above. The floorboards groaned faintly, vibrating with the whispers. Shadows pooled in corners, stretching and curling like smoke. Outside, the fog pressed thickly against the window, living and aware. Time slowed. The room held me suspended, between heartbeats and whispers. I pressed my hands to my ears. The whispering seeped through anyway, not words exactly, but understanding, a sensation that someone was trying to tell me something I could not yet comprehend. I closed my eyes. The ceiling pulsed in sync with me. Every beat, every breath, every sigh reflected back. Alone, yet entirely not alone. The whispers pressed, patient, and I realized the motel was listening. Walking toward the lobby, I noticed it. A shadow, trailing me. No one else was around. Every corner, every reflection, confirmed it. It mirrored my movements. Slow, patient. I stopped. It stopped. I took a step. It took a step. The air smelled faintly metallic, like rain on old iron. My pulse quickened. Every floorboard creaked under my weight, but the shadow moved without sound. Soft, deliberate, unyielding. I tried to confront it, to look directly at the edge of its form. It blinked and vanished, yet its presence lingered, a cold weight pressing against my back. Every reflection in the polished counters, every darkened window, confirmed it was still there, watching, waiting. The hallway stretched, corners bending unnaturally, walls breathing. I felt its gaze even when I couldn't see it. A subtle hum vibrated in the floor, in the air, in the silence between my footsteps. I kept moving, slow, careful. Every instinct screamed to run. Every sense whispered to stay. The shadow did not follow in the usual way. It wasn't chasing. It was patient, curious, alive. I reached the lobby. The light flickered, and I could feel it again just beyond the edge of my vision. Soft, watching. I knew then the motel itself had eyes, and this shadow was one of them. A key appeared under my pillow. Cold, small, unfamiliar. I didn't remember leaving it there. I turned it over my hand. The metal felt heavier than it should. The air around me seemed thicker, charged with quiet anticipation. I tried it on doors at random. Some refused to turn. Some revealed rooms I had never seen before. Inside one, whispers curled around me, soft and insistent, urging me closer, to look, to notice. The walls were faded, covered in dust. Yet in one corner, a mirror reflected me. Or, not exactly me. I saw myself asleep, staring back with wide, unblinking eyes. A version of me I did not recognize. Yet it felt real, alive. The air hummed metallic and thick, vibrating along my arms. The key pulsed in my hand. Or maybe it was my pulse syncing with it. The whispers grew louder, but still distant, familiar, impossible. I wanted to leave, but curiosity rooted me, drawn to the figure in the mirror, to the silent self that watched me from across time and space. Shadows shifted as I moved. The room breathed around me, walls contracting and expanding ever so slightly. Every object seemed aware, turning subtly when I wasn't looking. The mirror's surface shimmered. I blinked. The reflection moved independently, smiling faintly. It knew me, and I knew it had always been waiting. I set the key down on the dusty floor. The whispers lingered. The mirror hummed with silent life. And I realized some doors once opened cannot be forgotten. The fog outside thickened, curling around the motel like slow smoke. Shadows moved inside it, pale, elongated, dancing without sound. Each flicker felt deliberate, teasing, as if trying to guide me somewhere I did not wish to go. I followed them, hesitant, feet pressing into the damp ground. The fog wrapped around my ankles, cold and wet, tugging me closer to the motel's edge. Shapes flickered just beyond vision, never still, never fully there. I blinked. They shifted, always just out of reach. The air smelled of wet earth, moss, and a faint metallic tang. Every breath felt heavy, sticky, laden with anticipation. I could hear faint whispers through the fog. Not words, exactly, more like soft vibrations curling around my ears. Each flicker of movement drew me forward. I realized too late. They were leading me back inside. The motel loomed ahead, walls stretching, twisting, breathing in rhythm with the fog. Every shadow I passed seemed to bend toward me. The light from the windows trembled, flickering as if acknowledging my presence. The fog shifted again. Forms danced in its gray thickness, pale and distant. I followed, my pulse quickening, yet my body feeling slow, heavy, trapped in some invisible current. The whispers grew closer, brushing against my skin. I could feel them inside my chest, curling around my ribcage like fingers. The fog and the motel seemed one, alive, breathing, watching. I tried to step away, to break free, but each movement only drew me deeper, into the shadows, into the walls, into the quiet, suffocating heart of the motel itself. I blinked. The flickers dissolved. The fog thickened, and I understood I was no longer outside. I had never really left. One room felt different. Its walls pulsed faintly like lungs. A slow, steady rhythm I could feel through my feet, my chest, my fingertips. The floor seemed to sigh under my weight. Soft, deliberate, almost conscious. Every object shifted when I wasn't looking. A chair creaked slightly. A curtain trembled, though the air was still. I walked slowly, careful. The room's pulse quickened with my heartbeat, almost as if aware of me. The air smelled faintly of old paper and wax. A metallic tang lingered on my tongue. Shadows pooled in corners, curling like smoke. The walls leaned slightly, pressing closer. I felt the room's attention. It was alive, aware. I reached for the door. It didn't respond. The room seemed to inhale softly, a sound that was more felt than heard. A whisper slithered along the floorboards, faint, unintelligible, curling around my ankles. The furniture shifted again. A picture frame tilted slightly, as if nodding in acknowledgement. I moved toward the center of the room. The floor pulsed under me. The walls seemed to breathe. Every shadow stretched toward me, patient, curious, silent. I pressed my hands to the walls. They were warm, cold, soft and hard at once. It was impossible to distinguish the room from life itself. The space held me, studied me, breathed with me. I stood there, aware of every heartbeat, every breath, every silent motion. The room pulsed, patient, and I understood it was aware of me, and I was entirely alone. Another mirror caught my attention. Shadows pooled behind me, deeper than the dim light allowed, and their eyes, pale, watching. I blinked. The eyes followed, always just out of reach, always patient. The reflection moved independently. It breathed. It smiled, slow and deliberate. Something impossible, uncanny, curling at the edges of recognition. I stepped back. The air thickened, metallic and cold. A low hum resonated through the floorboards, vibrating through my shoes, through my bones. Shadows leaned closer, stretching toward the mirror. I tried to look away, but something anchored me. The pale eyes pulled at me, insisting, lingering. I noticed my reflection was not entirely mine. Subtle differences, a twitch of the lip, a tilt of the head, a shadow moving where none should exist. The mirror's surface seemed liquid, breathing, pulsing with the rhythm of my heartbeat. The room smelled faintly of wax and iron. Every sound amplified. My breathing, the faint creak of a floorboard, the whisper of air through the curtains. I reached out, the eyes widened slightly. A pulse of cold swept across my fingertips, though the glass had no warmth. The mirror breathed with me. It was alive, aware. I stepped back again. The pale eyes remained, watching, patient, unblinking. I understood then, some reflections do not belong to the living, and some eyes never let you leave. A low, constant humming began, soft at first, almost imperceptible, then stronger, vibrating through the floor, the walls, even the air around me. It wasn't mechanical, not a wire, not a fan. It was alive, a voice without words, whispering secrets I could not grasp. I pressed my ear to the wall. The hum deepened, a vibration through bone and flesh. It felt like the motel itself was alive, listening, breathing, aware of me. Shadows pooled in corners. They shifted when I tried to look directly at them. The floorboards trembled softly under my feet. Every object in the room seemed to resonate with the sound. The air smelled of dust, damp wood, and something metallic, subtle but sharp. I could taste it on my tongue. The hum synchronized with my heartbeat. Every pulse echoed through the room. Through me, I stepped back. The walls seemed to lean closer, enveloping me in a quiet, vibrating embrace. I couldn't tell where the motel ended and I began. I pressed my hands to the plaster, feeling a hum through my fingertips. Time slowed. I breathed in rhythm with the walls. Every exhale seemed mirrored, every heartbeat matched. Alone, yet entirely not alone. The motel's secrets whispered through the humming. Patient, watching. I knew I could never truly leave. Not while the walls remembered me. In a corner, a door appeared, where none had been before. It was pale, warped, almost pulsing in the dim light. I hesitated. The air smelled of dust and damp iron. A faint vibration hummed through the floorboards. It was alive, I turned the knob. Cold metal pressed into my palm. The door swung open silently, revealing a hallway that stretched endlessly. Doors lined both sides, identical, unremarkable. Yet each showed moment from my past, warped, twisted, wrong. A child I had once known, smiling too widely. A street I had walked, stretched impossibly long. I tried to step back. The hallway stretched farther, swallowing my retreat. Whispers curled along the walls. Soft, deliberate, impossible to place. Every door seemed to breathe. Every shadow pulsed. I reached for one of the doors. It opened to a room I recognized, but the faces inside were not mine. They stared at me with hollow eyes. I tried to leave. The hallway stretched again. Corners lengthened. Ceiling and floor blurred together. My footsteps echoed endlessly, swallowed by the unseen. A soft exhale pressed against my neck. The air grew heavier. Time slowed. The hallway pulsed like a living thing, feeding on my fear, my hesitation, my memory. I realized then there was no end, no exit, only doors, only shadows, only the hallway stretching forever into itself. I turned back. The door closed silently behind me, and I knew the motel was patient. It would wait forever. I opened a door and stepped inside. The room was dark, yet pale light seemed to drift from the walls themselves. Hundreds of faces pressed against every surface, all staring, all pale. They whispered, soft syllables curling around my ears, some pleading, some mocking, their tones impossible to place, yet faintly familiar. The air smelled faintly of wax and dust, thick and oppressive. The floorboards creaked beneath my weight, though no one else moved. I could feel the pressure of their gaze, pressing against my skin. I stepped closer, a face in the corner, its features subtly shifted. Not human, yet somehow familiar. A memory I could not place stirred at the edges of my mind. The whispers grew louder, or perhaps it was my heartbeat amplifying the sound. Time stretched. The walls seemed to pulse, as if alive, breathing alongside the room's inhabitants. I reached for one face, hesitant. Its skin was cold, smooth, yet solid. It shivered when I touched it, though I was alone. Other faces twisted, shifting in silent conversation. Shadows pooled beneath the ceiling, stretching downward like smoke. Every blink revealed new faces. Some vanished as I looked away. Some lingered, patient, waiting for my attention. I realized I was not observing them. They were observing me. Every hesitation, every small motion, every breath. I stepped back, heart hammering. The room pulsed around me. Whispers threaded through the air, curling into my mind. And then I understood the faces weren't human. Yet they were intimately familiar, as if the motel had stored fragments of everyone who had ever been here. And now it was showing me. A single chair sat in the center of a dark room, alone, waiting. I approached slowly. The air smelled faintly of old wood, dust, and something bittersweet, like memories I couldn't place. The floorboards whispered beneath my feet, soft and deliberate. I sat. Immediately, memories flooded me. Not my own. Some distant, some intimate. Faces I didn't recognize. Places I had never been, yet somehow knew. The chair hummed softly beneath me, a vibration that traveled up my spine, curling into my chest. It was alive, aware, patient. When I stood, the chair slid across the floor silently, following, observing. Every movement mirrored in subtle, deliberate ways. Shadows gathered in the corners, leaning slightly, stretching toward the chair. The room pulsed, breathing with quiet patience. The air felt thick, charged, almost sentient. I wanted to leave, but the chair had other plans. It guided me, silently, slowly, through the room. The memories pressed closer with every step. Soft whispers brushing my ears. Fragments of lives I would never fully understand. I realized the chair was more than furniture. It was a vessel, a witness, a keeper of stories I could not leave. I stepped back again. The chair waited, patient, alive, and I understood some objects never let go. Some chairs never forget. Outside, the fog grew thick, curling like fingers around the motel. It whispered my name in the wind, soft, insistent, almost human. Each syllable slid along my skin, brushing my neck, crawling across my arms. Every step forward felt heavier than the last. The ground was wet, cold, clinging to my shoes. It felt like moving through memory itself, through places I shouldn't exist. Shapes swirled in the fog. They moved with intention, pale and indistinct. They beckoned me closer, then retreated when I blinked, always just out of reach, always patient. The air smelled faintly of rain, earth, and iron. Every inhale carried the weight of the motel's unseen presence. The lights flickered along the edges of the fog. Shadows stretched unnaturally, brushing my vision. I tried to step back. The fog shifted with me, surrounding, guiding, pushing. I realized the mist was alive, aware. It moved with purpose. A faint whisper slid along my ears. Not words, not sentences, just sounds, carrying meaning I couldn't grasp, curling into my mind. The fog thickened. I could barely see my own hands. Yet the whispers persisted, soft and patient. I understood then that the motel had extended beyond its walls. Its reach now in the fog, the wind, the air itself. I moved forward, reluctant, unable to resist. Each step carried me deeper into the silence, into the unseen. The shapes in the fog pulsed with life, guiding me, always toward the motel. And I knew I had never truly left. I discovered a hallway that stretched farther than it should. Doors lined either side, identical, unremarkable, yet each whispered secrets, soft syllables curling around my ears, intimate, terrifying. My footsteps echoed endlessly. The floorboards groaned in response, vibrating beneath my feet. I walked for hours, though time felt suspended, each step swallowed by the walls. Every door seemed alive. Some whispered fragments of memory I recognized. Some whispered events I had never experienced. All fed off my fear, twisting it, folding it into the rhythm of the hallway itself. The air smelled faintly of wax, dust, and iron. The walls pulsed softly, breathing in time with my heartbeat. Shadows stretched unnaturally, following me, recoiling, then stretching again. I tried opening a door. It resisted, then swung open silently to reveal a room I could not comprehend. Faces pressed the walls. Whispers tangled with my thoughts. The floor vibrated softly beneath me. I moved on. The hallway stretched further, bending corners impossibly, elongating time and space. The ceiling and floor blurred together, swallowing the edges of reality. I realized then I would never reach the end. It was not meant to be found. The hallway pulsed with life, feeding off my steps, my heartbeats, my fear. And still I walked, alone, but not unseen. The motel was patient, and I was entirely caught in its embrace. I entered the lounge. It smelled faintly of old wood and stale carpet, thick with dust and something metallic beneath. A single figure sat in the corner, silent, motionless, waiting. I froze. The air felt heavy, charged with quiet awareness. Even the shadows seemed to lean toward it, stretching like smoke across the floor. I stepped closer. The figure did not move, did not blink, yet I could feel it observing me. Patient, patient. Every heartbeat seemed amplified in its presence. I tried to leave, slowly, carefully, each step measured. The figure mirrored me perfectly, step for step, turn for turn, breath for breath. I stopped. It stopped. I shifted. It shifted. The walls seemed to contract around me, alive. The carpet whispered beneath my shoes. A low vibration hummed through the floorboards. The air smelled of dust, old paper, and something cold, metallic, almost like blood. I could hear a soft exhale from the corner. I could feel a weight pressing into the small of my back. The figure never moved, yet I felt its presence everywhere. In the floor, beneath me, in the air I breathed, in the shadows pooling along the walls. I tried to confront it, to speak, to demand its attention. My voice caught in my throat, dissolved into the room. The figure remained silent, patient, watching. I realized I could no longer tell which was real, which movement belonged to me. Which shadow was my own? The reflection of my own hesitation stared back at me. I tried to step aside. The room pulsed, subtly imperceptibly. The figure shifted in perfect sync, mirroring even my smallest motions. I was trapped in its rhythm. The longer I stayed, the heavier the air became. Time blurred. Minutes stretched into hours. The room hummed with quiet life. The walls seemed to breathe in tandem with my heartbeat. I understood then I was entirely alone, yet completely observed. The silent guest existed only to watch, and I was entirely caught in its gaze. I left the lounge eventually, but I felt it follow me still. Every shadow, every corner, every flicker of light reminded me of that still, patient presence, of that silent guest who mirrored me in every impossible way. I woke to a silence that felt heavier than usual. The room I had fallen asleep in was gone. Where it had been, an empty space yawned, walls bare, light trembling across the floor. The motel seemed to pulse. Slowly, deliberately, breathing in response to my panic, expanding and contracting like a chest filled with air I could not touch. Shadows stretched across the corners. They reached further than before, lingering in impossible angles. The air smelled faintly of dust, damp wood, and a metallic tang that pressed against my nose. I swallowed. My throat was dry. I stepped forward cautiously. The walls seemed to lean, breathing softly around me. The floorboards whispered under my feet, shifting ever so slightly. The empty space felt alive. Aware of my intrusion, I tried call out. My voice dissolved into the room, echoing briefly, then swallowed by the silence. The motel seemed patient, eternal. It waited as I tried to understand what had happened. The space where the room had been stretched into itself, folding edges, swallowing corners, erasing memory. I realized then I might never leave. The walls were aware. The shadows were aware. Even the floor pulsed with quiet attention. I pressed my hands to the nearest wall. It shifted slightly under my touch, cold and unyielding. The emptiness hummed softly, a vibration that traveled through my arms, my chest, my spine. Time lost meaning. Each second lingered, heavy, suspended. The motel was patient, and I was utterly alone. I backed away, but the empty space followed me. Every step I took was measured, observed, absorbed. The room that had vanished was still present in its absence. A reminder, a warning. I understood then. The motel does not forget. It does not tire. And it waits. Always. At last, I found it. A door unlike any other. Its keyhole shaped like my own eye. I trembled, fingers brushing the cold, warped wood. The air smelled faintly of iron and old smoke. A low hum vibrated to the floorboards, soft yet insistent, pressing against my chest. The motel seemed to lean closer. Waiting, I placed my hand on the knob. It was warmer than the surrounding wood, pulsing faintly, alive. I turned it slowly. The hinges groaned softly, then fell silent. Inside, the motel seemed to bow. Walls stretched and breathed. Whispers wrapped around me, soft, deliberate, humming with life. A pale figure stood there, smiling knowingly. I stepped through and vanished. The hallway behind me remained empty, silent, patient. Only a whisper lingered. My own name. The air smelled faintly of dust and memory. Shadows curled in corners, stretching in impossible ways. The walls pulsed, almost breathing, as if aware of the absence I had left behind. I realized then the motel does not release what it has claimed. It waits. It remembers. And I was only one more story to feed its patience. No footsteps echoed after me. No doors remained open. Only the soft hum of walls and the whisper of my name drifting endlessly through the halls. Some doors should never be opened. Some keys should never be found. And some places will wait forever, patient, watching.